In details, we delve into Africa. Congo needs to do more to raise awareness about mpox and the availability of vaccines. An official with the response team said on Thursday, warning the campaign to distribute the shots will take longer than anticipated. Congo's mpox vaccination campaign launched this month in the hard-hit East. A report by Newsman says that a vaccination site in North Kivu province found that locals seemed unaware or suspicious of the shots. Chris Kasita, the head of Congo's mpox response team, said more needed to be done to boost vaccine uptake, adding that the ongoing vaccination campaign would last longer than the planned 10 days. During a recent visit to a vaccination site in Kibati, a camp that hosts displaced people in North Kivu province, residents described receiving no information about the inoculation efforts. Congo's mpox vaccination campaign is a key step in efforts to contain the outbreak at its epicenter, from where it has spread to numerous other African nations this year. The campaign's scope has been narrowed to start due to limited supply, with just 265,000 doses currently available in the country of around 100 million people. Rwanda's outbreak of the deadly Marburg virus is easing after vaccinations of the most vulnerable people, including health workers, but mpox cases are still spreading to new African countries. Rwanda's health minister and the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's head said on Thursday. In early October, Rwanda began administering vaccine doses against the Marburg virus to combat an outbreak of the Ebola-like disease in the East African country. Neuro infections have now reduced by more than 50% compared with the first 2 weeks, Health Minister Sabin Nsanzimana said, adding that the country had experienced consecutive days without new cases or deaths and that most people were recovering in treatment centers. The minister said the latest numbers showed 62 confirmed cases of the viral hemorrhagic fever and 15 deaths. He said that 38 people had recovered from the disease and 9 were still under treatment. Meanwhile, the mpox outbreak that the World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern continued to spread on the continent. Jean Kaseya, Director General of Africa's CDC, told the same briefing. The number of affected countries rose from 6 member states of the African Union in April to 18 in October. Kaseya said Africa has seen more than 42,000 suspected mpox cases, including 1,100 deaths so far this year, according to African CDC data. Kaseya said that while over $800 million have been pledged for the agency's fight against mpox, donors are now slow to translate these promises into money and vaccines needed to accelerate the response. Tunisia's central bank will no longer have the exclusive power to adjust interest rates of foreign exchange policy and must only take such action in consultation with the government. But it will be allowed to finance the treasury, a bill proposed by lawmakers showed on Friday. The step is the latest move that will completely undermine the central bank's independence after continuous criticism by President Kais Saied, who has said that the bank should not be a state within a state. The potential major change in the central bank law comes as public finances face a severe crisis. The country has been unable to secure Western funding since Saied seized nearly all power in 2021, ruling by decree in a move the opposition has called a coup. 27 lawmakers warned that Tunisia would inevitably go bankrupt if the bank law was not changed. They say that the current law adopted in 2016, which does not allow the central bank to make loans to the public treasury or direct bond purchases, has led to huge losses for the state, estimated at $36.6 billion. The bill also proposed that the bank will not be allowed to sign agreements with the foreign oversight authorities without the president's approval. Said rejected last year the independence of central bank, saying it should lend directly to the state's treasury to avoid costly loans through banks. 7 people died and 6 others were injured after a suicide bomber detonated on unidentified device at a cafe outside a police training school in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, police said. Police say the victims included officers and civilians who were having tea outside the General Kahahiye Police Academy on Thursday. The Al-Qaeda-linked militant group, Al-Shabaab, claimed responsibility for the attack through a statement published on its affiliate's website. The group has in the past carried out attacks in Somalia. A paramedic at Medina Hospital told newsmen that several injured people were receiving treatment. Thursday's attack came 2 months after 37 people were killed in an attack on a public beach in Mogadishu. Somalia has been taking over security responsibilities from foreign troops who had been deployed under the African Transition Mission in Somalia, whose mandate ends in December. Texas on Thursday filed what appears to be the first lawsuit against a doctor for allegedly violating the state's ban on providing gender-affirming care, such as puberty blockers and hormones, to transgender minors. In a complaint filed in the District Court of Collin County, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton claimed May Lau, a pediatrician at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, prescribed testosterone to at least 21 minor patients seeking to transition from female to male. Paxton in the complaint called Lau a scofflaw who is putting the health and safety of minors at risk. Lau and UT Southwestern did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed the gender-affirming care law in June 2023. The law states that the medical license of any doctor providing drugs or surgery for the purpose of gender transition to minors must be revoked. Lau wrote almost all of the prescriptions shortly before the law took effect in September 2023 so that her patients could fill them later. According to the complaint, but Paxton said that counted as providing banned care after the law took effect. He also said that Lau wrote 2 illegal testosterone prescriptions while the law was in effect. Paxton further claimed that Lau falsified records to conceal the fact that her patients were transgender, violating Texas Business Code. The lawsuit seeks money damages and a court order preventing Lau from violating the law in the future. The Texas Supreme Court in June upheld the state's ban on gender-affirming care for minors, rejecting arguments by families with transgender children and doctors that the law was discriminatory and deprived parents of the rights under the state constitution to make decisions concerning their children's care. 25 Republican-led states have enacted laws or policies that ban or restrict gender-affirming care for minors, according to Movement Advancement Project, an LGBTQ think tank, and many of those laws have been challenged in court. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to consider a challenge to Tennessee's ban, which could decide whether other states' bans will survive as well. In an 11th-hour turn of events, Robert Robertson, the first person said to be executed in the U.S. based on the largely discredited shaken baby syndrome hypothesis, was granted a temporary hold on his death sentence. Late on Thursday evening, the Texas Supreme Court issued a temporary stay in the case, delaying the looming execution and capping, for now, a back-and-forth series of legal maneuvers, including an earlier decision by the U.S. Supreme Court not to intervene in the case. When he learned of the last-minute delay of his execution, Robertson, who was convicted of murder in the death of his 2-year-old daughter, was shocked and then praised God, thanked his supporters, and proclaimed his innocence, said Amanda Hernandez, Director of Communications for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, during a news conference. The Texas High Court's ruling came after Travis County District Court Judge Jessica Mangrum initially put a temporary hold on Robertson's execution to allow him to testify in a legislative hearing next week, something sought by a bipartisan group of state lawmakers who had subpoenaed Robertson to appear in a bid to delay the execution. The temporary hold came through less than 2 hours before Robinson was scheduled to be executed. Shortly thereafter, however, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reversed it, putting the execution back on track. In response, state lawmakers quickly sought a temporary stay by the state's Supreme Court, which ultimately granted the request. Notably, Robinson's execution warrant was only valid through October 17th. A legislative hearing at which Robinson is set to testify is scheduled for noon on Monday in the Texas state capitol. Billionaire Mark Cuban chided fellow billionaire and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump on Thursday for his proposal to issue fresh tariffs on most Chinese goods, arguing it will be Americans who will pay the bill, not the Chinese. Cuban appeared with Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris in Wisconsin on Thursday and is set to hold a town hall for her on Saturday in Phoenix before heading to Michigan. He wasn't the only billionaire on the campaign trail. Tesla CEO Elon Musk was in Pennsylvania on Thursday, mobilizing Trump voters ahead of Election Day on November 5th. Trump's plan to impose fresh tariffs on up to 60% of goods from China in a bid to boost U.S. manufacturing is a crazy notion that will punish consumers who will end up paying the bill, Cuban said. Trump has maintained that his trade policies, which call for pricey tariffs on goods not only from rivals such as China but allies such as the European Union, would revitalize American manufacturing and yield enough revenue to ease concerns about a ballooning deficit. To me, the most beautiful world in the world is tariff, Trump said on Tuesday in a sometimes tense interview at the Economic Club of Chicago. Cuban, an entrepreneur and star in the popular Shark Tank television series, brings tech-savvy pop culture appeal and business credibility that is especially appealing to young men who have become a key demographic in a race where the gender gap has widened as males overall have shifted to Trump. Cuban credited Trump with having a coherent trade and tariff policy when he was a political outsider in the 1990s and early 2000s, but said his current ideas are just gibberish. Grand jury indicted a 14-year-old alleged shooter and his father who bought him the gun on Thursday in the September slaying of 2 students and 2 teachers at a Georgia high school, affirming initial charges brought by prosecutors and adding numerous other criminal counts. The Barrow County grand jury indicted Colt Gray on a total of 55 counts, including 4 counts of malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, plus aggravated assault and cruelty to children. Grand jurors indicted his father, Colin Gray, 54 years old, with 29 criminal counts, including second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and adding reckless conduct to prosecutors' initial charges. In bringing second-degree murder, as the country grapples with school shootings. The September 4th shooting at Appalachia High School in Wenda, a city of 18,000, some 50 miles northeast of Atlanta, also wounded 9 people. Colin Gray earlier pleaded not guilty to initial charges of involuntary manslaughter, second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. He faces up to 180 years in prison on those charges. Coates Gray, a 9th grade student at the school, was earlier charged as an adult with 4 counts of murder and has not yet entered a plea. He faces life in prison. Both are held without bond and are scheduled for an arraignment on the indictments on November 21, when they may enter pleas. Former President Donald Trump delivered heat after heat on Thursday night at the annual Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner in Manhattan, a historic Catholic fundraiser where in an election year, the candidates traditionally take advantage of the opportunity to roast and mock each other. The Met Gala for Catholics, some have called it. Vice President Kamala Harris notably dodged the dinner, instead phoning it in with a pre-recorded video message, confirmed she scrabbled to pull together at the last minute. And it was only mildly funny for a very specific set of millennial voters. United States has charged a former Indian intelligence officer for allegedly directing a foiled plot to assassinate an American citizen who advocates for Khalistan, an independent Sikh state carved out of India. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York said on Thursday that it had registered murder for hire and money laundering charges against Vikash Yadav for trying to kill Gurprat Singh Panon. The indictment of Yadav for the first time implicates the Indian government directly in the attempted assassination of a dissident. Indian government has said that it was cooperating with the U.S. ongoing investigation. It has not responded to the specific charges against Yadav yet. Earlier this year, Nikhil Gupta, an Indian national also charged with the case, was extradited to the U.S. from a prison in Prague. Washington has accused Indian agents of involvement in an assassination attempt on Panun, a dual U.S.-Canadian citizen. India has labeled Panun a terrorist, though he denies the allegation, claiming to be an activist advocating for Khalistan. According to the indictment, Yadav was the mastermind behind the plot to murder Panon, and he recruited Gupta in May 2023 to orchestrate the assassination in exchange for getting a case against him in India dismissed. Yadav's indictment comes days after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged that Indian agents were involved in the killing of Sikh separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, setting off a new row that led to both countries expelling diplomats. Courts of Appeal in Canada's most populous province ordered a new hearing on Thursday in a youth-led lawsuit claiming Ontario's climate plan violates young people's rights. The ruling, which refuted the lower court's finding that the case is not governed by Canada's charter, sends the case back to a lower court for another hearing meant to determine whether Ontario's climate target violates their rights and whether to order the province to devise a new target. The lawsuit, launched against Ontario by 7 people, now aged 17 to 29, is the first Canadian human rights-based climate lawsuit to be heard on its merit. It's argued that the province's greenhouse gas emissions target is inadequate and violates the young people's right to life, liberty and security, along with the right to equality. The case hinged on government obligations to younger generations as the planet warms, whether Canada's constitution recognizes such obligations and whether emissions targets have enough practical impacts to affect individuals. Emmett McFarlane, a constitutional expert and politics professor at the University of Waterloo, called it a confused decision because of the way it framed positive and negative rights. Positive rights, the right to or benefit as opposed to freedom from harm, have not been found to be guaranteed by Canada's charter. The trial judge had found the youth were arguing for positive right. The Court of Appeal disagreed. It overturned an initial and it's giving the applicant a second try at the trial level. So it's very important for them from their perspective, but they haven't won anything yet. Leader of Brazil's biggest right-wing party cannot speak to his candidates for the 2026 presidential election by court order, even though his office is across the corridor. Valdemar Costa Neto, head of the Conservative Liberal Party, faces challenges in planning his campaign strategy due to the presence of former far-right President Jair Bolsonaro in his office. Bolsonaro has been declared ineligible for 8 years due to his attacks on the country's electronic voting system and is under investigation for allegedly plotting a coup. To prevent witness tampering, the Supreme Court has barred conversations between Bolsonaro and Costa Neto. The PL has become the largest party in the lower house of Congress, riding Bolsonaro's coattails after Brazil's electorate shifted to the right in 2018. Costa Neto hopes the party will become the largest in the Senate in 2026 to impeach Supreme Court justices that have ruled against Bolsonaro. The party has made strides in municipal elections, winning mayoral races in 2 of 26 state capitals and disputing 9 more in October 27 runoff votes. Brazilian conservatives are increasingly looking to Sao Paulo Governor Tarcísio de Freitas as a no-standard barrier on the Brazilian right. Costa Neto hopes a victory by former U.S. President Donald Trump next month will boost right-wing sentiment globally, helping conservatives in Brazil who have been hounded by the country's judiciary. You're watching the international news in Atlantic Television Network. Still ahead, residents flee Kupiansk as Russia strikes northeast. We'll be back after this break. Do stay with us.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off from food, clean drinking water and essential supplies. Health experts are warning of a potential outbreak of deadly diseases, and medical facilities are out of commission. The situation is dire. Helicopters, boats and high-riding trucks capable of navigating the treacherous, waterlogged areas are urgently required to reach the countless men, women and children still awaiting rescue. The Nigerian media is issuing a desperate plea to the government, humanitarian organizations, international actors and citizens across the nation. Step in now, before it's too late. For more information on how you can help, contact Professor Usman A. Tar, the Honorable Commissioner for Information and Internal Security, Borno State, on 0809-233-3955. Every second counts.
This is powered by Atlantic Television Network.
From the lands across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all the sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economic, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching the broadcast of the international news in Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts, placements, bookings, and commercials, and you can connect with us and watch us on ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, X formerly Twitter at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website at atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. Cuba accused the United States late on Wednesday of a half-hearted investigation into a 2023 attack on a communist-run nation's embassy in Washington, D.C., further souring already bitter relations between the neighboring countries. Man in dark clothing hurled 2 Molotov cocktails at the Cuban embassy in Washington in September 2023 before running into the night, U.S. and Cuban authorities have said. No one was hurt and little damage was done to the building. Johanna Tablada, Cuba's Deputy Director of U.S. Affairs, said U.S. authorities have told Cuban counterparts that they are investigating the incident, but officials have yet to identify the perpetrator. The message is against Cuba. You can do whatever you want, Tablada said on Cuban television on Wednesday. She said slow progress violated U.S. law and the international obligation of nations to protect diplomats and their embassies. U.S. is dedicated to protecting diplomatic personnel and premises in the U.S., and the U.S. Secret Service is investigating the 2023 terrorist attack on Cuba's diplomatic mission in Washington. Cuba is a state sponsor of terrorism, which has led to sanctions and economic crisis on the island, according to reports. The U.S. has declined to label the attack as a terrorist attack, and Cuba accuses the U.S. of hypocrisy. The spat has sparked a recent decline in Cuba to U.S. relations, which reopened after an Obama-era thaw. Cuban investigators criticized the U.S. investigation, noting that surveillance cameras near the attack should have made identifying the attacker easier. Venezuela has detained 3 Americans and 2 others for alleged terrorist activities, Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello said on Thursday, marking an increase in the count of foreign prisoners in the South American country. The government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has regularly accused members of the opposition and foreign detainees of conspiring with U.S. entities such as the Central Intelligence Agency to plan terrorist attacks. Venezuela released dozens of prisoners, including 10 Americans, in December 2023, following months of negotiations between Caracas and Washington. In exchange, the United States released Alex Saab, a Colombian businessman and close ally of Maduro. The new list of detainees, which also included 1 Bolivian and 1 Peruvian, brings the number of foreign detainees in Venezuela to at least 12. Last month, authorities say they had arrested 4 other Americans, 2 Spaniards, and a Czech citizen. And the U.S. State Department said a U.S. military member was among those detained. Cabello did not say when the 5 new detainees were arrested, but said one of the Americans, Jonathan Pagan Gonzalez, had been captured in the border state of Zulia. Cabello provided no other information about the detainees or what led to their arrest. A man named Gregory David Weber was convicted 3 years ago on U.S. federal money laundering charges after laundering hundreds of thousands of dollars in drug proceeds for a Mexican drug cartel using Bitcoin, according to a 2021 press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington. Canada plans to give Ukraine a $47 million military aid package that will include small arms, ammunition, and protective gear, Defense Minister Bill Blair said in a statement on Friday. The aid package, which also allocates money for training Ukrainian troops, is part of a $500 million Canadian military funding committed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in July. The military assistance announced today provides Ukraine with important resources needed to defend itself against Russian aggression. Canada will continue to do what it takes to help them achieve victory, Blair said. Canada, one of Kyiv's strongest proponents internationally, last month said it will donate 80,840 surplus small unarmed air-to-surface rockets to Ukraine, as well as 1,300 warheads. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, Canada has committed $4.5 billion Canadian dollars in military aid. South Korea believes North Korea has sent troops to Russia, marking a grave security threat to the international community that Seoul will respond to with all available means. The presidential office said in a statement on Friday. Separately, South Korea's spy agency said the North was participating in the war in Ukraine and had decided to send 12,000 troops, including a special forces unit, Yonhap news agency reported. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol held an unscheduled security meeting with key intelligence, military, and national security officials to discuss North Korean troops' involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine, it said. South Korean officials have previously said it was likely true that some North Korean personnel were in Russia and involved in its war with Ukraine, but have not given a clear answer on the nature of the scale of any such deployment. Yoon's office said South Korea targeted, together with its allies, have been closely tracking North Korea's troop dispatched to Russia from the initial stages. It did not, however, provide any intelligence to back up the assertion of troop deployment. It also did not specify if it had information on whether North Korean troops were involved in combat. Zelensky said about 10,000 North Korean soldiers were preparing for deployment to fight Ukraine, but Kyiv's Western allies have yet to confirm its assertions that Pyongyang is sending troops, though they say they are studying it. Chinese President Xi Jinping will attend the 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia, from October 22 to 24, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Friday. During his visit, Xi will attend the leaders' meeting, the experts leaders' dialogues, and other activities, and have in-depth exchanges with leaders on the current international situation. Morning, a ministry spokesperson said at a regular news conference. China is ready to work with all parties to promote BRICS cooperation to usher in a new era of unity and self-reliance in the global south and jointly promote peace and development in the world, Mao said. Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte accused President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. of incompetence and a lack of leadership in a scathing attack on Friday that showed the deepening rifts between the two powerful families ahead of midterm elections. Duterte, the daughter of Marcos' predecessor, resigned from cabinet in June, signaling the collapse of a formidable political alliance that helped her and Marcos' son, and namesakes of the late strongman, secure the 2022 electoral victories. Duterte's accusations comes as the country gears up for midterm elections in May 2025, seen as a litmus test of Marcos' popularity and a chance for him to consolidate power and groom a successor before his single 6-year term ends in 2028. Since their falling out, Duterte and Marcos' relationship has turned hostile, driven by policy differences and investigations into former President Rodrigo Duterte's deadly war on drugs and other scandals involving his associates. The lower house of Congress, led by House Speaker Martin Romualdez, a cousin of Marcos, has slashed funding for Duterte's office by nearly two-thirds in the proposed 2025 budget. At one point in the press conference, Sarah Duterte said she had told a Marcos family member that she would have the body of former Presidents Ferdinand Marcos Sr., whom Rodrigo Duterte allowed to be buried in the Heroes Cemetery, exhumed and thrown in the South China Sea if they did not relent in their attacks. In February 2020, Nasreen and her husband Tawfiq were living in Shiv Vihar, an upcoming neighborhood in northeast New Delhi. But that month, riots erupted targeting Muslims like them, and Tawfiq was pushed by a mob from the second floor of the building where they lived. According to a police report, he filed days later from hospital. He survived but has a permanent limp and was only able to return to work, selling clothes on the street after spending nearly 3 years recuperating. Soon after the riots, the couple moved to Loni, a more remote area with poorer infrastructure and job prospects, but with a sizable Muslim population. There is no official data on segregation in India, whose long-delayed census also means that there are few reliable figures on how many Muslim enclaves have grown in the past decade. Muslims comprises about 14% of India's 1.4 billion people. Ground Zero in Delhi is the central neighborhood of Jamia Nagar, which has long been a temporary sanctuary for Muslims when communal riots break out. However, more Muslims flocking in the neighborhoods is overflowing despite a booming construction, according to 10 local leaders, including politicians, activists, and clergy, as well as 5 real estate agents. 6 Muslim community leaders said significant anecdotal evidence supported Susie Wain's assertion that segregation has increased. Jamia Nagar clergyman MD Sahil said the number of attendees at his mass early morning prayers had more than doubled to over 450 in the past 4 to 5 years, and that it reflected the overall rise in population there. Group of nearly 3 dozen rights groups called on Thailand's Prime Minister Friday to release a Vietnamese activist who has been ordered extradited home to face imprisonment on terrorism, saying he faces the possibility of torture if returned. Dap, who has United Nations refugee status in Thailand, was picked up by Thai authorities on a Vietnamese warrant in June as he was seeking to be granted asylum in Canada and is being held in Bangkok pending extradition. In the letter sent to Prime Minister Pentogan Tang Shinawatra, well as other Thai officials and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Amnesty International, and 32 other rights groups suggested DAP faces a real risk of torture, prolonged arbitrary detention, or other grave human rights violations if he is returned to Vietnam. Bidam is the co-founder of the Montagnat Stand for Justice group. He fled to Thailand in 2018 to escape persecution in Vietnam, which has been long criticized for its treatment of the country's predominantly Christian Montagnat minority. His group advocated for Montagnat's religious and order rights, training them in international and Vietnamese law and how to document abuses, which the NGOs said made him a target of the Vietnamese government. Yulia Baibak and her parents were forced to evacuate from the besieged Ukrainian city of Kupiansk due to Russian airstrikes. The evacuation was ordered as Russian forces continued to advance on the strategic hub in northwestern Ukraine. Kupiansk, reclaimed by Kiev's troops 6 months after its capture by Russia in February 2022, has been under increasing attack as Moscow steps up an offensive along the eastern front. The evacuation is being prioritized to evacuate the entire civilian population from the left bank of the Oskil River, or around 4,000 people. The situation had initially seemed livable, but now it seems like the end. The evacuation is part of a larger effort by Russia to threaten key transit hubs in northeastern Ukraine. French Prime Minister Michel Barnier and Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Antonio Tajani are set to meet at the border between the two countries on Friday to strengthen cooperation against illegal immigration. The two European Union members have faced tensions and criticism over the issue of immigration in recent years. However, the existing good relations between France's new Prime Minister and Italy's Tajani could help turn the page. They were European commissioners together, and Tajani was president of the European Parliament. Barnier called Tajani to signal cooperation on the migration ground and to meet at the border to signal collaboration on the control of illegal immigration. In 2023, Tajani had cancelled a trip to France after insults from France's previous Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin. France's new minority government, relying on the far-right National Rally, has cited the fight against illegal immigration as one of its top priorities. Barnier is keen to work with other European leaders on this issue, regardless of their political colors. The visit to the Italian border demonstrates Barnier's intention to have a say on European matters and is not willing to leave it to President Emmanuel Macron. The BRICS group will generate most of the global economic growth in the coming years, thanks to its size and relatively fast growth compared with that of developed Western nations, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday. Putin will host a summit of the group in the city of Kazan on October 22 to 24. He hopes to build up BRICS, which has expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as a powerful counterweight to the West in global politics and trade. The countries in our association are essentially the drivers of global economic growth in the foreseeable future. BRICS will generate the main increase in global GDP, Putin told officials and businessmen at BRICS Summit's forum in Moscow. The economic growth of BRICS members will increasingly depend less on external influences and interference. This is essentially economic sovereignty, Putin added. Next week's BRICS summit is being presented by Moscow as evidence that Western efforts to isolate Russia over its actions in Ukraine have failed. Russia wants other countries to work with it to overhaul the global financial system and end the dominance of the US dollar. China, India, and the UAE confirmed on Friday that their leaders will attend the summit. UNIFIL peacekeeping mission spokesperson on Friday denounced several direct, deliberate attacks by Israeli forces in recent days and said it had found evidence of the possible use of white phosphorus near one of its bases. The devastation and destruction of many villages along the Blue Line and even beyond is shocking, he said, referring to a UN-mapped line separating Lebanon from Israel and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Asked about the downing of a drone near its ship off the Lebanese coast on Thursday, he said the drone was coming from the south but circling around the ship and getting very, very close, a few meters away from the ship. According to Tenenti, an investigation several months ago had detected a trace of the possible use of white phosphorus by the Israeli army close to a UNIFIL base. He added that the UN Security Council was aware of the case. White phosphorus munitions are not banned as a chemical weapon, and their use, usually to make smoke screens, mark targets, or burn buildings by the Israeli military, is documented. However, since they can cause serious burns and start fires, international conventions prohibit the use against military targets located among civilians. Israeli military said on Friday that it sent another army unit to support its forces operating in Jabalia, the largest of Gaza's 8 historic refugee camps, where residents say tanks blew up roads and houses as they thrust further into the territory. Residents of Jabalia in northern Gaza said Israeli tanks had reached the heart of the camp using heavy air and ground fire after pushing through suburbs and residential districts. They added that the Israeli army was destroying dozens of houses on a daily basis, sometimes from the air and the ground, and by placing bombs in buildings and detonating them remotely. The Israeli military said its forces, which have been operating in Jabalia for the past 2 weeks, killed dozens of militants in close quarters combat on Thursday and carried out aerial strikes and dismantled military infrastructure. The escalation of Israel's Jabalia operation came a day after it said it had killed the country's #1 enemy, Yahya Sinwar, Hamas chief, whom it blamed for ordering the October 7 attack on Israel. The deadliest in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli military says its operation in Jabalia is intended to stop Hamas fighters from regrouping for more attacks. Residents said Israeli forces had effectively isolated the far northern Gazan towns of Beit Hanan, Jabalia, and Beit Lahia from Gaza City, blocking movement except for those families heeding evacuation orders and leaving the 3 towns. And that's it on the international news for today. Before we go, let's take a look at the major stories. We told you that Mpox vaccine rollout in Congo slower than expected. You also heard that Tunisia's central bank deprived independence on interest rates. Doctor sued for prescribing testosterone to minors. We also told you that billionaire Cuban shows up for Harris. Court blocks execution of man in murder cases. We also told you that Muslims segregate to seek security in Delhi. You also heard that residents flee Kupiansk as Russia strikes northeast. Many thanks for watching. I am Victor Peter. Remember, you can follow us on all our social media handles. X, formerly Twitter, is at Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website, AtlanticTVNetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Business news comes up next. Do stay with us.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off from food, clean drinking water and essential supplies. Health experts are warning of a potential outbreak of deadly diseases, and medical facilities are out of commission. The situation is dire. Helicopters, boats and high-riding trucks